Part 1. Back then, life was a rhythm. Friday pizza nights, always thin crust, half pepperoni, half veggie, because compromise was our thing. Sunday morning jogs at the park, with Laura slightly ahead and me pretending not to be winded. We'd walk home, sweaty and content, sipping oversized lattes from our favorite cafe like we were still in college. We were that couple. Not perfect, but consistent. The kind people describe as solid. Laura worked as an events director for a nonprofit that threw fancy fundraisers with names like Hearts for Hope and Dinners of Dignity. I taught 7th grade English and, 3 nights a week, bartended at a cozy tavern off Lincoln Street. We didn't have kids yet. Said we'd wait until the timing felt right, which became our favorite excuse for pushing hard conversations aside. But it worked. We worked. At least, I thought we did. Then came Vanessa. Laura's aunt by marriage, but only by title. She was barely 12 years older, dressed like she'd just stepped off a Capitol Hill runway, power blazers, neutral lipstick, pearls on Tuesdays. Vanessa was a polished force. A lobbyist, though I never quite understood what for. Something about healthcare reform and donor networks. Her words always floated just above the surface, glassy and non-committal. But she was magnetic, I'll give her that. She started helping with Laura's galas. Just logistics at first, then venue negotiations, then the full calendar of donors and outreach. Their work dinners became late-night meetings. I'd find half-empty wine glasses in the sink, sometimes lipstick-stained, and always Laura's, because Vanessa didn't drink red. I noticed the shift the way you notice fall creeping in, not in the air, but in the way shadows hit the floor differently. Laura's phone habits changed. She jumped to silence her notifications, carry her charger from room to room like it was fused to her lifeline. I'd glance over and see Vanessa's name on her screen more often than my own. Once, she left her phone on the counter, and it lit up with a message. Can't stop thinking about last night. Still buzzing. My stomach twisted. But I told myself, professional excitement. A big win for the gala, right? I started noticing her outfits. Laura used to wear soft things, flowy blouses, canvas sneakers, faded denim jackets. Now it was pressed slacks, heels with red soles I couldn't pronounce, and that new perfume, darker, bolder. Musk where there used to be rosewater. One night, she left the house with her hair in a sleek bun and a coat she hadn't worn in years. Said she was meeting Vanessa for a quick bite. She came home at midnight. Lipstick gone. Eyes unfocused. Work ran late, she muttered. I nodded, watching the way she moved like a puzzle I used to know the shape of. But the worst part wasn't the lateness or the lies. It was the way she started looking through me. I'd ask about her day, and she'd say, fine, then look back at her phone. I'd go to kiss her neck, and she'd flinch like I'd interrupted something sacred. One evening, I came home early from the bar. Just a headache, nothing big. As I stepped into the kitchen, I heard her on speakerphone. Her back was to me. She was laughing this low, hushed kind of laugh I hadn't heard in months. She's like a goddess, Laura was saying. And Daniel? He's just background noise. My heart stopped. Background noise. The line clicked off. She turned around too fast. Oh, hey, babe. Didn't hear you come in. I smiled like I hadn't just overheard my soul being dismissed. Said something dumb like, headache came on. Thought I'd call it early. She walked past me with a soft kiss on my cheek that didn't touch her eyes. That night, I sat alone on the porch, beer sweating in my hand, listening to the quiet hum of the neighborhood. A dog barked somewhere down the street. A wind chime rattled gently in the neighbor's yard. Ordinary sounds. Everyday peace. And all I could think was, I've become part of the ambience. I stared out into the dark until the bottle was empty, wondering how long it had been since I'd actually felt like a husband. Not a roommate. Not a bystander. Not an echo in my own home. They say betrayal doesn't start with lies, it starts with silence. With gaps that grow in the space between what's said and what's meant. And as I sat there, I realized something gutting. Our home was already fracturing, and I hadn't even noticed the first crack. Part 2. Suspicion doesn't arrive with a bang. It drips in quietly, steadily, like a faucet you didn't tighten all the way. One drop becomes a puddle. Then you notice the rot under the sink. It started with a receipt. I'd gone to pay our internet bill online, but our joint credit card was nearly maxed. Odd, since we'd been careful since cutting cable. I opened the statement. A few usual suspects, grocery store, coffee shop. But then, the Vanthorne Hotel, one night, Suite 502. 2 days prior. And just beneath that, a charge from a luxury spa tagged under a consulting firm I didn't recognize. Vanessa Clark Associates. Vanessa didn't run a spa. I closed my laptop, hands cold. My instincts flared, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was for a fundraiser. Maybe Laura was treating a donor. Maybe. But maybe it had started to feel like a veil stretched too thin. The next day, Laura left her purse on the kitchen table while she took a call outside. The leather was slightly unzipped, just enough for a white slip of paper to peek through like a tongue daring me to look. It was a handwritten note. Thursday, 9 p.m. Suite 502. Leave key at front. The handwriting wasn't hers. Vanessa's maybe. I didn't know. What I did know was that Thursday at 9 p.m., I'd been at home alone, folding laundry, watching the clock tick. When she came in late that night, Laura had claimed to be stuck at a post-event debrief. You know how these donors like to stretch things, she'd said with a tight smile. Then she disappeared into the shower without kissing me goodnight. That was the first night I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I confronted her, not hard, not loud. Just held up the note. No drama. No tears. Just a quiet, "Want to tell me what this is?" Laura didn't flinch. Didn't reach for the note. Instead, she sighed. That long, rehearsed kind of sigh that says you're the problem here. "Daniel," she said, slowly, like she was correcting a child, "you're imagining things again. I told you, that night was work. Vanessa had a client in town. We met there, discussed the year-end auction. That's it. So why was there a key left at the front desk? I don't know. Maybe they gave us the wrong room first. Maybe Vanessa wanted to freshen up before dinner. Why are you reading into everything? Because it doesn't add up." Her expression shifted. A flash of anger flickered in her eyes before it softened into patronizing concern. "You need to trust me more," she said. It was the way she said it, like I was defective. Like trust was some flawed software only she could debug. I nodded, pocketed the note, and said nothing else. Not because I believed her, but because I needed more. I needed facts. Over the next week, I noticed the changes pile up like bricks on my chest. Her perfume had changed. The rose sweet scent I'd bought her for Christmas last year sat untouched on the dresser. Now, it was something heavier, musky, sensual in a way that felt, not hers, and not for me. She started turning away when I kissed her goodnight. Little things. A slight flinch. A pullback. She stopped wearing pajamas, started wearing ropes. Nothing clingy. Always covered. Always guarded. We used to hug every evening when I came home. A routine. A reflex. Lately, she'd be too busy in a call, on her laptop, in the bath. Once, I stood behind her at the kitchen counter and wrapped my arms around her waist. She froze like a statue. "Not now," she said, unwrapping my hands with hers. That one cut deeper than it should have. I began checking her phone usage. Never her phone, just how often she looked at it. It was always in her hand now. Always being tilted away, screen facing down when I walked by. Sometimes, I'd see her smile at messages she never shared. Little flickers of warmth that never made it to our conversations. I mentioned going to therapy together. She scoffed. "I'm not broken," she said. That Sunday, I booked a one-night Airbnb under a friend's name and left after she went to bed. No note. No explanation. Just me, my backpack, and a wall of silence between us. I lay on the unfamiliar mattress, staring at the ceiling fan spin in lazy circles. This wasn't just a fling. This wasn't an affair of opportunity. There was planning. Secrecy. Codes. The note. The suite. The expenses run through Vanessa's firm. This was something layered. Something dangerous. And the scariest part? I didn't feel rage. Not yet. Just detachment. Like I was standing outside a house I used to live in, watching smoke curl from the windows, unable to remember what it felt like to hold the keys. They say denial is the first stage of grief. But I wasn't grieving. I was preparing. Because deep down, something told me, this rabbit hole went far deeper than I thought. And I was ready to start digging. Part 3. It's strange what silence does to a man. Not the silence of a peaceful morning or a good book. No, the silence I mean is dense. Suspicious. The kind that sits heavy on your chest at night and turns the hum of the fridge into something ominous. I used to trust Laura with everything. My accounts, my passwords, my plans for the future. She was my partner. Now, she was a question mark with a wardrobe full of secrets and a smile that no longer reached her eyes. So, I hired a private investigation service. Not some sleazy tabloid-type operation. A retired cop, a tech-savvy grad student, and a woman named Ruth who used to work cybercrimes at the state level. Ruth was the one who told me to stop looking for lipstick on collars. In this digital age, she said, It's all about shadows and the numbers. Within a week, they handed me a file. Ruth slid it across the cafe table like a detective in an old movie. I opened it with trembling fingers and found the first photo staring back at me like a punch in the throat. Laura, slipping into Vanessa's rental condo on Camden Street. Not dressed for work. No overnight bag. No briefcase. Just a low-cut top, heels, and a look I hadn't seen her give me in years. Taken Thursday night, Ruth said, tapping the timestamp. The same night she said she was at the board meeting. There were more photos. Laura leaving 2 hours later, hair disheveled, jacket off. Vanessa followed 10 minutes later. Different exit. Then came the emails. They'd been rerouting my auto payments. Laura had used my credentials, probably memorized or lifted from a shared spreadsheet, to cancel a few of our monthly debits and re-register them under a shell account labeled Greene Legacy Consulting. That wasn't a real business. It was a funnel, set up through a mail drop box in Maryland. Traced back to Vanessa. And the kicker? Laura had authorized the use of her childhood home, the same one her late grandparents had left her, as collateral for a lobbying fund tied to Vanessa's work. A slush fund with no paper trail until Ruth started peeling back the layers. She didn't just cheat on you emotionally, Ruth said, voice quiet. She compromised your financial footprint. If you hadn't caught this, they could have sunk your credit, or worse. I sat there, numb, not angry, not shocked, just hollow. I remembered the first time Laura took me to that house. She told me she wanted to raise kids there. She even pointed out the trees she used to climb with her brother, the cracked sidewalk she once scraped her knee on. It was sacred ground. Or so I thought. Turns out sacred has a shelf life. That night, I didn't go home. I rented a weekly place on the edge of town, nothing fancy. I took my laptop, a box of files, and the manila folder Ruth had given me. I laid everything out on the dining table like a detective piecing together a case. Because that's what this was now. A case. Not of infidelity, but conspiracy. I spent hours cross-referencing payment histories, calendar entries, and the photos. I built a timeline. I matched every charge to a location. I even found the spa's business license. It didn't exist under its own name. It was a sub-entity of an LLC owned by Vanessa Clark. She was laundering money under the guise of wellness services. And Laura? She was her proxy. Her mule. Some emails even hinted at future plans. One line chilled me. Once Daniel's pension is liquidated, we'll have the cushion to push the next bill through. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was exploitation. By midnight, my fingers were shaking from typing. I closed the final file, stared at the screen, and whispered the only truth I could grasp. I don't know who she is anymore. I looked around the dim room. The table lamp flickered, casting shadows across the walls like ghosts of my former life. I'd been so sure we were a team, that everything Laura and I built was ours, mutual, balanced. Instead, she'd been rerouting our life into a backdoor slush fund while feeding me leftover affection and half-hearted excuses. The worst part wasn't even the lies. It was how thorough she'd been. The details she covered. The seamless way she wore 2 masks and never cracked. I thought of calling her. Screaming. Demanding. But what would that change? She'd deflect. She'd twist the story. So I sat in silence again. Let it settle. Let it scrape the bottom of my gut like glass in a blender. Then I backed up everything on a thumb drive. 2, actually. 1 for me. 1 for a lawyer I hadn't met yet but already knew I'd be calling. I stared at the folder name. Greene. Full evidence. And with a single keystroke, I closed the file on my laptop. And on the life I thought I had. Part 4. The thing about planning revenge is that it requires a level head. You can't rush it. You can't let the fire in your chest burn hotter than your strategy. And you definitely can't make it about emotion. That's where people mess up. They yell. They lash out. They slam doors. I didn't do any of that. I became quiet. Focused. Surgical. The morning after I closed that file, I opened a new one. This one was titled, Exit Plan. Step 1. Secure myself. I opened a new bank account under my own name at a credit union in a nearby town. I moved what was left of my personal savings, including the emergency stash I'd squirreled away over the years and birthday cards and tip jars from the bar. I called the school district and requested a direct deposit change. My next paycheck would go into that account. Step 2. Freeze shared assets. I logged into our joint accounts and quietly withdrew half, exactly half. No more, no less. Just enough to ensure I wasn't left out in the cold if things got legal. I didn't close the accounts. Didn't raise alarms. Just made sure if the storm came, I'd have an umbrella. Step 3. Go deeper. I called Marcus, my old roommate from college, now a financial compliance officer at the Bureau of Regulatory Affairs. We hadn't talked much in years, but he answered on the second ring like we were still sharing ramen in a dorm. "You're calling me out of the blue," he said, "which means something's wrong or you finally want to invest in crypto." "Worse," I replied. "I need you to flag a woman named Vanessa Clark." I gave him the Shell LLC names, the false consulting fronts, the email printouts. He didn't ask too many questions. "This could blow back," Marcus warned. "If she's playing with nonprofit funds, she's not just shady, she's sloppy and dangerous." "Then we catch her in the act," I said. Step 4. The stage. Laura's charity gala was fast approaching, an annual event to celebrate the nonprofit's donors and raise funds. Vanessa had been planning it with her, of course. They'd secured the ballroom at the Whitmore Hotel, a place with more glass than walls and a view of the river meant to impress the city's elite. Black tie only. Finger foods shaped like stars. That kind of thing. I reached out to the AV guy handling the presentation slides. Told him I was preparing a thank you segment to honor Laura's hard work. I handed him a USB stick with a video presentation. Clean, polished, harmless, until the last minute. That last minute held everything. Photos of Laura entering Vanessa's condo. Screenshots of money transfers from the nonprofit's accounts to shell companies. Emails between them referencing our exit plan, and, after Daniel's portion clears, a closing slide that simply read, "Trust should never be taken, especially not from those who give it freely." The night of the gala, I wore the only tux I owned, walked in like I belonged. Laura greeted guests at the entrance with her perfect smile, looking radiant in a silver gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. She kissed my cheek in front of the mayor. I smiled back. Show time. I mingled, made small talk, kept a flute of champagne in my hand without drinking a drop. Vanessa floated through the room like she owned it, whispering in ears, laughing at jokes, air-kissing donors. At exactly 8:32 p.m., Laura took the stage. She thanked everyone for attending, acknowledged the sponsors, introduced a video presentation prepared, she said, by my wonderful husband, Daniel, as a tribute to the team's hard work. There were polite claps. I stood near the back of the room, behind a potted plant, heart thudding like a war drum. The lights dimmed. The screen lit up. The first 2 minutes were safe photos of volunteers, smiling children, event snapshots. People laughed. Applauded. Laura beamed. Then minute 3 hit. Gasps. Hands raised to mouths. A silence so thick it swallowed the room. Laura stared at the screen, frozen. Vanessa's face dropped, her poise splintering in real time. Her eyes darted to Laura, then to the crowd, as if calculating how to vanish through glass. By the time the final slide hit, the entire room was quiet. No excuses. No distractions. Just the truth, plain and raw. I stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the mic, my voice calm and steady. "Some stories demand to be told." This was one of them. I didn't wait for applause. Didn't stay for the aftermath. I walked off the stage, past the dumbfounded donors and the frozen expressions, past the wine tables and the servers standing still, and out the ballroom doors like a man who finally took his life off mute. No apologies. No pleas. Just facts. They say truth is a blade. That night, I used it. Part 5. They always tell you the worst part is the fall. The moment you find out. The heartbreak. The betrayal. But they're wrong. The worst part comes after. When the world keeps moving, but you don't. When people whisper your name in hallways like it's a funeral. When you walk into a grocery store and someone who once called you, buddy, avoids your eyes. After the gala, I didn't go home. I didn't answer Laura's calls or Vanessa's panicked emails. I drove to the lakeside cottage my late uncle left me, a battered little place with chipped paint, a crooked porch swing, and no cell reception unless you stood on a rock and offered a blood sacrifice to the reception gods. Perfect. I spent the first 3 days doing nothing. No revenge. No plans. Just breathing. I kayaked across the still water every morning at dawn, the paddle slicing through the glass like a knife through skin. I cooked simple meals. Burned the suits I wore to the gala in a rusted fire pit out back. Watched the blaze eat every inch of silk and thread. It was cathartic. Clean. By the end of the week, Laura filed for divorce. She cited emotional cruelty. I didn't contest it. Let her tell whatever version of the story she needed to sleep at night. My lawyer, a steely woman named Marla, handed over a single document that had everything we needed. Full copies of Vanessa's financial transgressions matched against Laura's own signatures. Rest assured, Marla said, she'll walk away with nothing more than her maiden name. The fallout came fast and loud. Local papers ran headlines for weeks. Nonprofit director implicated in fraud scandal. Gala night turns into whistleblower bombshell. Lobbyist Vanessa Clark under investigation for laundering funds through charity. Vanessa was suspended from her firm pending a full criminal inquiry. Laura was removed from the nonprofit she once helped build. And me? I stayed silent. Never once gave an interview. Never once issued a statement. Because when someone lights your life on fire, you don't owe them the story of how you survived the smoke. You just rebuild. I took a job tutoring underprivileged kids through a local outreach program. It didn't pay much, but it paid in something better, quiet purpose. I taught Shakespeare to boys who'd never held a hardcover book. I helped immigrant teens write college essays in a second language. I drove home with a tired smile instead of a shattered one. Some nights, I sat on the dock, sipping black coffee while fog drifted across the water. The peace felt earned, scarred, and in its own strange way sacred. I didn't think much about Laura. But when I didn't remember her laugh or the way her eyes used to soften at night. I remember the speakerphone. The words, he's just background noise. I was never background noise. She simply turned the volume down so low she forgot I had a voice. Months later, my childhood friend Clay, the sheriff back in my hometown, paid me a visit. He brought a six-pack and bad news disguised as a favor. I figured you'd want to know, he said, voice tight. Vanessa didn't just rope in Laura. She cut deals with her brother, David. They mortgaged your in-laws' entire estate under a dummy inheritance trust. The family didn't even know. I stared at him. So this goes back further? He nodded. Yeah. Vanessa and David were planning this for years. They wanted it all. Control over the family trust. The nonprofit. Laura was just their inside girl. A pawn with designer heels. I didn't say anything for a long time. Just watched the sun sink behind the trees like it owed me nothing. They thought their betrayal would break me, I said at last. They mistook silence for surrender. Clay didn't reply. He just cracked open a beer and handed it to me. I sat on the edge of the dock that night, toes skimming the surface. Alone, but not lonely. No more pretending. No more fixing what never wanted to be whole. Let them burn their legacy to ash. I built mine from the ground up. Again. Scratched. Burned. But unbroken. The end.